A member of Congress takes the knee. The Cowboys try to take their knee and stand up too, and the president's popularity surges. Is Donald Trump playing 4D football? We will discuss the relationship between national sports and nationalism in elections around the world after Germany's shocking election Sunday with an actual journalist, Mary M. Lane. Then, Ariel Davidson, Amanda Prestigiacomo, and His Eminence, Paul Bois, join the panel of deplorables to discuss the cowardly Republicans who killed Obamacare repeal, the New York Times' creepy communism obsession, and the Paris Hilton climate accord. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. We have an actual journalist coming on this show. Typically, we try to stick strictly to fake news reporters, but we're breaking that rule for once. We're going to have Mary Lane on. She's written for the Washington Post, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Associated Press, and she has a really interesting perspective on how these sports protests and football protests relate to nationalism and national elections. But first, we have got to run down very quickly all that has happened in the NFL in just the last 24 hours. You know, Kim Jong-un is about to fire rockets all over the world, but we need to focus on the important things like the National Football League. So, to begin, this just broke about 20 minutes ago. Sports Illustrated is going to run a cover now that says, "A nation divided, sports united." And it's going to show all these athletes photoshopped in to be linking arms against President Trump. Because that's why we read Sports Illustrated. That's why we watch ESPN. Because we want to hear liberals rattle on about how much they hate Donald Trump. Obviously, they're just moving further in this left-wing direction. It's cost them subscribers. It's cost ESPN subscribers. It might destroy bundled cable. But nevertheless, they will persist. Last night, the Dallas Cowboys joined the kneeling gesture during the national anthem. I got a little bit of flack for this. I wrote a piece at the Daily Wire called "It's a Grand Old Flag," and in that, people said that I unfairly marred the Dallas Cowboys. Here is a clip of what the Cowboys did last night.
She said the Cowboys players wanted to show unity, but they were very adamant about wanting to separate that message from the national anthem. Sean?
All right, Lisa, and as they take a knee collectively, boos can be heard from this sellout crowd in Arizona.
Can be heard over the sellout team of the Dallas Cowboys. What you could hear there was massive booing when they all got down. Even Jerry Jones, the owner, got down on one knee. But what they did was they kneeled down before the national anthem, and then they stood up for the national anthem. This seems to me a distinction without very much of a difference. They are clearly participating in the protest that Colin Kaepernick began, which is a protest of this country, an assertion that the country is fundamentally oppressive toward non-whites. And it is part of that exact same protest. Now, they wanted to have their protest and eat it too, or something like that. They wanted to have it both ways. I think it was too clever by half, an absolute cynical failure. But Dave Rubin brought up this point yesterday. With all of these teams kneeling down, what are they going to do? Are they going to stand up in 3 weeks? They say, okay, all of the racial problems in the country are over. We can stand up now. Of course not. They've backed themselves into a political corner. If the Cowboys think that this is their way of getting out of that political corner by changing the timing of the kneeling, whatever. I think it's pathetic. I think these people are cowards and too big for their britches. They're paid tens of millions of dollars a year, and they're paid to run around a field and to entertain us. They have to run their mouths about politics, about which they know absolutely nothing. It's totally ungrateful. It's inexcusable. I won't be watching. Not that I watch a lot of football to begin with. I'll be watching even less now. But if it can end this nonsense, then sure, I suppose that's fine. Sarah Sanders made a very good point, a point that a number of us have been making over here, which is that the protest doesn't make any sense. She said yesterday, quote, "I think if the debate is really for them about police brutality, then they should probably protest the officers in the field who are protecting them instead of the American flag." Absolutely right. It is a nonsense to protest the American flag. The very fact of your being able to protest that American flag without prosecution is a defeater for your protest in the first place. It undermines the premises of your protest, which is that the country is fundamentally rotten and oppressive toward whichever demographics of people. So, good point from Sarah Sanders. I'm glad. We missed Scaramucci. We were very upset when the Mooch had to leave, but Sarah Sanders is doing a good job. Maxine Waters says that Trump should be impeached over his tweets. I don't think that requires any commentary. Gotta love Maxine Waters. And then a Congressional Black Caucus member has decided to take the knee. Here is Sheila Jackson Lee.
And you cannot abridge without law and regulation, and there is no regulation that says that these young men cannot stand against the dishonoring of their mothers by you calling them fire the son of a bee. You tell me which of those children's mothers are a son of a bee. That is racism. You cannot deny it, you cannot run for it, and I kneel in honor of them.
If anybody could quite make out what the point was that Sheila Jackson Lee had to say, please write in and let me know. This is the same woman who compared the Tea Party to the KKK in 2010. She has nothing of value to add to this country or to the federal government, and she is funny to watch, though. She did make one small point, which is that there's no rule that says that they can't take a knee during the national anthem. I'm not sure about that. There are regulations in the league governing what they can dance to in the end zone. I recommend the lyrics to a song that would be great for them to dance to called It's a Grand Old Flag, It's a High-Flying Flag, and Forever in Peace May She Wave, the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. I'm not sure that they'll learn that anytime soon, but anyway, there is now a bipartisan effort underway to strip the NFL of taxpayer funding for stadiums. This bill was co-sponsored by Cory Booker, a Democrat, and James Lankford, a Republican, in June. It is now gaining steam, obviously under very different circumstances, and it's gaining steam on Capitol Hill. Probably people like Cory Booker will pull out of that now that there is this partisan, anti-Trump racial tinge to it, but we'll see what happens. That is all the background. Now we have, if I can ever get my earpiece to work properly, we have the great privilege of bringing in an actual journalist. We have Mary M. Lane. She's written for everybody, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, AP, but we'll forgive her for all of that. Mary, thank you for coming on. Please explain to us what the relationship is between these absurd football protests and actual national politics.
Yes, well, I just became a subscriber several days ago, so I don't have my Leftist Tears mug, but I did bring
Marshall, you got to send her one.
Stein.
Oh. Hey, that's pretty good. That is,
yeah.
Well, I hope that's at least a sufficient vessel for Leftist Tears. We'll get you the finest vessel for that as soon as possible.
I'm hoping. Although I am more liberal than you.
Well, Attila the Hun is more liberal than me, Mary, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I'm over in the US for several weeks on research, and I was kind of looking forward to being away from the politicization of sports that's happened in Germany. To be fair, it tends to happen in big sports events, the World Cup or whatever, but still, I was like, I'm looking forward to just watching some football filling out.
So you live in Germany most of the time? I
do. I've been there 9.5 years. Technically, I could be a citizen, but the dirty little secret of the welfare state there, which I have a lot of in some aspects, but they don't like dual citizenship. So in order to become a German, I would have to give up my American citizenship.
Well, that's really the question here, too, is what does it mean to become a German? Because I guess at these soccer games, there have been protests for the non-ethnic Germans not to participate in the German national anthem. Is that right?
Yes, there is. I mean, it's a long story in history. So basically, in America, right now, is this divide between the far and far right has inspired the politicization of sports, politicizing. Whereas in Germany, they had this sort of politicizing of sports, and that has inspired what happened with recent elections.
So you think that there was a connection between politicizing sports in Germany and the elections that took place 2 days ago?
Yes, I mean, there were many. This was not the first one. Well, actually, no, it was the first one. It wasn't necessarily primary. But essentially to catch people up on sports and the national anthem. Germany made their national anthem a song called Deutschland, Deutschland.
Da, da,
In
da, 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 yeah, I remember that.
Exactly. The tune is Haydn, used for a lot of Protestant hymns. I don't know about Catholic ones.
That's right.
Anyway, so the lyrics to that were Germany, Germany, above all in the world, when for protection and defense, it always stands together. And it's very militaristic.
Oh, the Germans are a militaristic people. Sure.
They can be. And it wasn't really sung by soccer players because the World Cup wasn't a big thing until sort of after the war, and obviously they didn't want to be. They were very scared of being capital of Germany, which makes sense because it had just happened. But in 2006, Germany hosted the World Cup, and it was a new generation. So our generation, you and I are roughly the same age, obviously hadn't been happened. They barely remembered the wall, and they were like, "This is amazing. This is a time where we can show Germany that we're not really, or sorry, we can show the world that we're not Nazis, that we're a very liberal country. Even the most conservative country supports extreme, policies, whether that's good. The point is, they're not Nazis." So in 2006, the team was mostly white, and mostly ethnic peoples, but and the national anthem became this whole thing again. They used the last stanza of the original one, which goes, "Unity and justice for the German father. Let's strive toward love," which sounds pretty non-controversial.
You would think it'd be non-controversial, but on the modern left, everything is controversial.
Yeah, well, what ended up happening was 2006 World Cup went great. And then in 2010, Germany decided that they would continue this push towards national pride. But two of the members of the team by this point had heritage from Islamic country. So you had Sami Khedira, who played in all 7 matches. He was only subbed twice. And then you had Mesut Özil, who's a 3rd generation. So right. He's got Turkish roots, but he's 3rd generation.
They've been in Germany a long time.
His whole life, and his parents and grandparents, and he's a practicing Muslim, but he dates non-Muslims, so he's not, the Ben Shapiro Muslim. And they refused to sing. And so it became in 2010 this politicization of sports. So the establishment was pretty much loved, right, in terms of being voted for. But then this new idea of, is Germany finally be proud of itself?
You're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if we can totally get you, but what you're saying is, I think, that this election became very anti-establishment in this because of the issues like this. My question is, what is the relationship between this kind of German nationalism, a European nationalism that's mostly blood and soil and rooted in a people, and the American nationalism that's more civic, that includes different sorts of peoples and different people who immigrated here at different times? Whenever a far-right party is elected in Germany, I was joking with Andrew Klavan before, we sort of say, hey, go left. Germany, that's the one country, you guys can go left, that's just fine. But whereas here we might say, stick rightward. What is the relation, and what's the implication for, say, the American elections that are coming up in a few short years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First off, if you speak German and you get a German passport, so I'm eligible for a German passport, for example. And if I gave up my American one and got a German one, it would not make linguistic sense for me to say, I have become German. Right. Ich bin Deutsch geworden, the way you could to be American. So there's always this tension where you can't really become German. But the left parties obviously were supporting the influx of refugees, which is a different debate. And they kind of want to build a unity without having sort of national unity. So in Germany, if you say the sentence, I'm proud to be German, we got into this debate right after the election, the elephant round, where all the parties on Sunday had to talk about why they lost. It's delightfully awkward.
So if you say the sentence, you're breaking up a little bit, but if you say the sentence, I am proud to be a German, that's verboten, to borrow another word. That's taboo.
It's considered, yeah. On Sunday they had this thing on Will, which is their big talk show, and they had all the candidates on who won or lost, and you had the far right party, which is they do a lot of things, but they were like, yeah, we're proud to be German. Everyone was like, whoa. And
It's
so the
shocking,
sentence, ich bin stolz darauf, Deutsch zu sein. And all the other people were like, well, I'm proud that I was born in a country as democratic as this, but I'm not going to say I'm proud.
You know, unfortunately, we probably have to let you go now because Mark Zuckerberg or whoever is messing up our connection. So we're not allowed to say these things, which are probably thought crimes. But Mary, thank you for coming on. We'll have to bring you back when we can get a better internet connection. And that's really fascinating. For people who can't hear what Mary was just talking about, in Germany, there was this issue where people who wanted to say the German national anthem, who wanted to put their hand over their heart, who wanted to stand up, they were encouraged by Antifa, the original version of Antifa, not the American incarnation. Oh, and I'm sorry, we have to say goodbye to Mary. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
For those who couldn't quite hear that, the German version of Antifa encouraged them and peppered them and hectored them to disrespect the German flag because they weren't ethnically German. There's a great irony here that these people who ostensibly are standing up for the small and the oppressed are trying to create divisions within Germany. It had big implications for that election. There was a huge reaction. If the phrase, I am proud to be a member of my own country, becomes taboo or verboten, then you're going to get a reaction. I think we saw the beginning of that here in the United States, and we're going to see that all over. We're seeing that in Europe right now, and it poses real threats. So perhaps the American left ought to get on board and support a little bit of patriotism, and they won't push that reaction so far, because I think people really, really do not like it. With that, we have to bring in our excellent panel of deplorables. We have a wonderful one today. We have Ariel Davidson from the Hoover Institution, Amanda Prestigiacomo from the Daily Wire, and His Eminence, Paul Bois. So very quickly, I don't want to harp on the NFL too much, but just going around the horn here, Ariel, do you agree with President Trump's handling of this cultural issue? And is he playing 4D football?
It's a tough question. It's hard to always predict what's going on in the mind of President Trump.
Certainly true.
Yeah, right? I will say this. I've had a few people ask me this now, and I'll try to keep it short and sweet. And I always direct people to this article that Matthew Betley put out in Weekly Standard. I think it was earlier this morning, and I thought it was really a wonderful piece written by a Marine veteran. And he sort of, he said that we should try to approach some level of understanding, perhaps with both the people who are frustrated by those who are kneeling and for those who are kneeling. My one critique would be that I don't really know what the kneelers want, what the ultimate objective will be after this is done. Are they going to continue to kneel for 3 to 4 weeks? Are they going to kneel indefinitely? So my question would be, whenever we see any sort of activism, there's usually a primary objective at the end of that activism. And
not on the left. It's perpetual revolution, Ariel. It's perpetual revolution.
I know that. And Stacy on the right this morning did a radio show in St. Louis, and she's a great, wonderful political commentator. If you don't listen to her, I recommend it. But she sort of commented, she said, I'm really curious what they want at the end of this protesting. Is there a final objective that they're working towards? In which case, let's talk about that. But I think the lack of sort of having a clear-cut objective is what's most troubling to me, because I don't have a problem with protests. That's the American, that's our fine art in America. We protest like no one else can protest because we have wonderful laws that protect us and allow us to do that. So I'm fine with people protesting. I just want to know, what are you protesting? If you're not protesting the flag, then, why are you kneeling during it?
And there are two questions here. There's the meta-political question, which is, do I think it should be outlawed? Of course not. In that sense, I'm fine with it. I like our constitutional protections. But then there's the real political question. Is it a good protest or is it a bad protest? Does it help America? Does it hurt America? Is it truthful or is it false? And I think it's absolute nonsense. Amanda, is he playing 4D football? And should he be?
Well, I think President Trump is doing this kind of for personal reasons. He's just trying to rally his base.
Absolutely,
a lot has happened with DACA, and healthcare is a disaster. Tax reform again on the back burner. So that being said, this was the easiest trap in the world. I mean, this is clearly. I don't typically say this about President Trump, but this is clearly 4D chess or football, as you
4D
said.
Football, yeah. I think that makes it rugby. I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about sports.
Right. This was the easiest trap in the world. I mean, he's getting his enemies to kneel during the playing of our national anthem. I mean, this is not rallying just the base. This is rallying most of America, a majority of Americans who think that's disrespectful and disgusting to basically spit on the graves of those people who fought for your freedom to do that. Like you said, of course you can. Is it politically advantageous? Does it make any sense? Is it disrespectful? Should you do it? So President Trump, this is a big win on his part. Mm-hmm. And I know Rush Limbaugh was mentioning this today. People kind of overlook the cultural war, but it's so important to politics. I mean, like Andrew
Everything else is just accounting, Amanda. Everything that isn't cultural is just accounting.
Exactly. So this was actually, it's a little, it's divisive, sure. But it's kind of a war that needs to be fought, and they walked right into President Trump's trap. So smart move by him.
Your Eminence, Mr. Bois, I know that you think it's 4D chess, so we have to move on to more news. Nominally Republican Senator Susan Collins has given the final nail in the coffin for Obamacare repeal after other nominally Republican senators, John McCain and Rand Paul, also vowed to keep in place the law they promised for 8 years to repeal. Paul Bois, we constantly attack Collins and McCain for stabbing their party in the back, but we seem to let Rand Paul off the hook. What's up with that?
Well, because Rand Paul, he dresses it up in the "my principles" rhetoric. And, Susan Collins and John McCain, they do it for political reasons. They do it so they can look nice to the mainstream media and yada, yada, yada. But Rand Paul, he's just doing it because he's Mr. ideologically motivated, and I'm standing for my principles. And frankly, it's narcissistic, and we should call it out every bit as much as John McCain and Susan Collins. It's getting ridiculous at this point.
It is navel-gazing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Grow up, Rand Paul.
It is navel-gazing. There's this excellent essay, which I frequently recommend, Rationalism in Politics, by Michael Oakeshott. And in it he says, the rationalist, the ideologues like Rand Paul, they're always standing for something. They're never really doing anything, but they're standing, and then they stand. Their legs probably get tired because of all this standing. Well, thanks for your principles, Rand Paul. It's gotten us absolutely nothing. Good job. You've accomplished nothing. Go home. Ariel, Collins seems to have voted against this because her state is poor and because Obamacare expanded Medicaid. If that is the case, if we can get poor states hooked on this with the dependence to the federal government, then is there ever any hope to repeal entitlements?
I mean, that was Milton Friedman's point, right? I think we might have brought this up in the past, where there's nothing more permanent than a temporary entitlement program. So that sort of, that speaks to how hard it is to roll back something once you give it away or once you start giving in to people's demands. I think I'm on board, again, going back to the Rand Paul notion. I'm on board with that. I'm happy to be critical of Rand Paul because even though he's sticking to his quote unquote principles, at this point, it's sort of like we can take what we can get, and this would have been a step in the right direction. In terms of Susan Collins, I think we just have a bunch of people in the GOP who are what I call spineless jellyfish. They run on a certain platform, and they're unwilling to pull the trigger when it comes to actually enacting what they've run on. I was one of the people that sort of called Susan Collins' office multiple times during various votes, and so I have no shame in doing so. I think that she's been sort of an embarrassment for the GOP. She's not a reliable vote when it comes to conservative principles. And, same thing with McCain as well. I think I sort of categorize them as GOP sellouts. Does that mean I think they're bad people? No. But I think when it comes to, that's one thing that bothers me, especially on Twitter. People say, oh, you can't criticize these politicians because they really are good people. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, but I'm criticizing their policies.
Yeah, I don't care if they're good people. And it must be nice for Rand Paul. It must be nice to be able to stand on the sidelines and pretend at moral superiority while real men go out and do the things that you're too afraid to do and actually risk their political careers to accomplish the thing that they've been promising for 8 years. Must be real nice for Rand Paul. What a principled guy. Love your principles, Rand Paul. Amanda, is it worth primarying these rhinos and running them all out of Congress, or is a liberal Republican better than no Republican at all?
Liberal Republicans have gotten us nowhere. So if we can primary them and we can kind of if President Trump can maintain his base, and he can kind of push for these people to be primaried, these liberal Republicans, then I would say go for it, because as we saw during the election, President Trump spent no money, and he still won. He just used social media. So that populist base, there is something to it. I know people don't like to admit that, but there is something to that. So if we get, if you can get President Trump behind it, and you can get this populist base who voted for Trump for his principles, not just necessarily for the man, maybe we could see some change in that regard. It's always hard to challenge an incumbent, but it's possible.
I voted for the covfefe. I didn't vote for the principles or the man, but it's a minor point. Okay, listen, I know that you all want to keep hearing about the New York Times' crazy communist obsession, the new Paris Hilton climate accord, and my final thought on President Trump's role in all of this. But, guys, you've got to go to thedailywire.com and subscribe. Thank you to all of the current subscribers who allow us to keep the lights on in here. If we get more subscribers, I'll get an earpiece that works, and we'll be able to make the Skype function too. So if you go over there right now, you'll get me, you'll get the Andrew Klavan Show, you'll get the Ben Shapiro Show. I know you're yawning while I say this, but wake up, buddy. You get the Leftist Tears tumbler. Now I've got your attention. The perfect vessel for delicious leftist tears. You can serve them hot or cold, always salty and delicious. We've actually had to order several thousand more for all of the NFL players. We're packaging up new vintages. We'll be shipping cases very soon. So go over to thedailywire.com right now, and we'll be right back.